Every church is different. Pastors have unique personalities. There's this whole idea of fit, the church culture with the pastor personality. But we want to tackle this idea of which personality traits are good for pastoral leadership. So welcome to Rainer on Leadership. We're going to dig into something that I find fascinating. I've taken lots of personality inventories. For the record, the Myers-Briggs is probably my favorite. It's one of the more thorough. I am an ENTJ. Dad, do you mind sharing what you are?
INTJ.
Not a shocker there. So,
not a shocker. You're an E. Not a shocker. I'm an I.
Very true. And if you don't know what those mean, I'd encourage you. There's some free versions. That can be freer. There's some free versions of the Myers-Briggs that are out there that I find helpful. There's lots of good inventories though, and we're not really talking about inventories on this particular episode. But I would encourage you, if you've never had a personality inventory, go take 2 or 3 of them, and it'll give you a good idea of kind of where you are. It's good to be self-aware. So
I needed one of those, Sam, to make me aware that I'm an introvert.
You did not need a personality inventory to let you know that, but it is good to know thyself. I think that's Socrates. So emotional intelligence is a thing. I also think that's Romans 12, if I'm not mistaken, the beginning of Romans 12, that you should know who you really are. I think I'm getting that right. I don't have the text in front of me. So it's a worthy topic, certainly. I'll just come right out of the gate and say you could be just about any personality and be a good pastor. But there are some personality traits that I think do lend themselves to pastoral responsibilities. We'll get to that in just a second.
Before you get to the sponsor, what does someone do if they are like me and they don't even have a personality?
Well, you just have to dig deeply. It's there.
Got it.
You've got to pull it out of yourself.
Got it. Okay. To the sponsor.
And at your age, if it hasn't happened, it's old dog, new tricks sort of thing. So
old dog, definitely. Thank you.
All right. Certainly want to thank Church Answers University. The institution is a fast-growing school that offers ministry training and education at a fraction of the cost of a typical degree program. We started Church Answers University with this idea that we would help African pastors actually get some certification, but then it has since expanded greatly. And the school currently offers the certification in Christian ministry and a certification in women's discipleship, and more are on the way. Really excited about that. So stay tuned. We hope to be announcing that soon enough. But the certification in Christian ministry and the certification in women's discipleship are excellent paths to take. Who is this for? Well, you might have a seminary education. You could have a doctorate. You still may want to do this. It's good ongoing education. It's good to be fresh. This is a very fresh training, but it's also for those who may not be able to go to seminary, have ever been to seminary, or have no plans to do that. So here's the deal. You love deals at church. That's what we do. We do deals, right? Church Answers is known for their deals. So for Rainer on Leadership podcast listeners, we have been given generously by a donor 5 50% scholarships, a value of $748, which is half the cost.
Yes.
So five half off scholarships. The value is $748. And by the way, this training includes your books. You get the books shipped to you.
Free.
So, you go to school and there's all these fees and then you got to buy books. This is everything. You can get a women's discipleship certificate. You can get a Christian ministry certificate. Well, because of a generous donor, half off. So, and if I remember the donor correctly, it's just the first 5. There's no selection process. It's first come, first serve.
First term, yes.
So how do you do this? Well, contact Matt, M-A-T-T, at churchanswers.com. Again, there's 2 T's there, Matt at churchanswers.com, and he will be glad to tell you how to get the scholarship. So thank you, Matt, for helping us out with this.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so does the ideal personality exist for pastoral leadership?
Well, the answer to the question is an obvious no, because we all have different types of personalities. I did okay as an introverted pastor. I think I had to be a functional extrovert more times than I was comfortable, but I was able to compensate. And compensation is a large part of personality issues. If you know yourself, then if you have areas where you perceive their deficiencies, like mine, where I'm an introvert and you really need to be out with the people, extrovert in pastoral ministry, I had to I had to compensate. And so many times, Sam, I would first of all, I knew that I didn't compensate as much as I should. And then secondly, when I did compensate and try to be functionally extroverted, it wore me out. But the thing about it is, there's not an ideal personality, but there are some traits. There are some traits that I think can be learned with any personality mix. And that's my segue to you, because these are the traits that, you've been in pastoral ministry a lot longer than I was. You're 40, 1980, 43 years old. I am 67 years old. And you've been in pastoral ministry a lot longer than I have. And you've basically done a lot of study, anecdotal and other types of research. And these four, I think, are going to be fantastic for our listening and viewing audience.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback a little bit before we get into these four traits. You know, I I think there's a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I think I have that right. Idea, two
I
sides of the
believe that.
same coin, two face,
Mhm.
idea here with any personality. So if you're an introvert, that doesn't mean you're naturally a bad pastor. If you're an extrovert, that doesn't mean you're naturally a bad pastor. Introverts have strengths that extroverts don't, natural strengths. Let me put it that way. But anything can be learned. So as an extrovert, I tend to bounce around a lot. On a Sunday morning, one of my favorite things to do is to get to as many people as I possibly can. Well, what's the downside of that? That one person that really needs to, for you to talk to them, you might miss them. Now, if you're naturally an introvert, you're likely just going to focus in on one or two people, which is great for them. But on a Sunday morning, maybe you should be bouncing around a little more and saying hello to more people. So there's give and take, pros and cons, all the cliches with any personality mix, and I do think it's a personality mix. It's not like just you just have one trait, extrovert, introvert. There's how do you make decisions? And I'm a strong in on the ENTJ, and I think that's intuition. I make the decisions that I make. We're known for being data people, but the decisions I make are, and you're the same way, intuitive. Like I just go with my gut, even regardless of what the data says. So um, I think that we need to just know that your strengths can often be your weaknesses, and it really depends upon the situation. And you really have to train your own personality to work in whatever situation you're in. So, does the ideal personality exist for pastoral leadership? Um, no, but there are some things that are helpful, and I think the first one is key here: patience.
Yeah, where do
Um,
you rate yourself in this? Patience. Put 10 being extraordinarily patient, one not being at all patient.
Average, I would say I'm fairly average there. I wouldn't consider myself a very patient person, but then I wouldn't say I'm impatient either. I've learned this. I'm more naturally impatient, but being a pastor and having four children, and a wife who is a free spirit, uh, has really made. I've had to be patient. I'm just, it's just my life now. So I would say this is more learned. If you would have talked to 18-year-old Sam, that would be for me to go back in time and have a conversation with myself. I would just say you don't need to be so impatient about this. So I think I've learned this more than anything else, but it has become part of my personality. I think I've
And
done
I
this
would
long enough to where it is who I am now.
And I would say, with the 29-year differential in our age, or whatever the case may be, I cannot remember how many years. Let's see, 50, 25-year
25.
difference. 25. That's right. 29 would be your brother. What's his name? Jess. So I would say that I have not moved on the spectrum toward greater patience as much as you have, even though I've been around longer. I would say I still demonstrate more impatience than I do patience.
Well, I pastor an established church, it was forced upon me, right? If you're talking, how I work, I've got a family as well. And obviously you can have a different personality with your family than you do with your church. And that's definitely something to think about too. You could be very patient with your church and quite impatient with your family because it just builds and builds and builds, and you're exercising all your strength at your church. And then all of the weaknesses come out at home. So that's another good reason to take some personality inventories, because they will expose your weaknesses. And a lot of times you can control those weaknesses in like a public setting, like a church, but then you get into a private setting, like a home, and you can explode. I know I've done
True.
that a few times, and I have to be careful about that. I'm not one to just explode. That's not my personality. I tend to be, I won't say even keeled, but I tend to be more consistent in my personality. That being said, I certainly have had times where I exercised all this discipline with my personality in a church setting, only to come home and exhaust that discipline on my family. Um, so these are things that can be controlled. These are things that can be learned. I think I've learned to be average when it comes to patience. But I think if you are naturally more patient, that does lend itself better in most churches.
Agreed.
If you are naturally an impatient person, I mean, there's could be some good things about that because you're going to push and push and push. But typically, when you're dealing with a lot of people and people issues and drama and sin and, the ups and downs of life as pastors do, I think patience is one of these personality traits that is more beneficial than not in the pastorate. So I'll
Hey,
just chalk that one up to it's part of the fruit of the spirit too, right?
yes, it is. It is. So I'm going to put a hypothesis out there about the Rayner family and just the males, just starting with the patriarch, me, then with the oldest you, then with Art, then with Jess, the baby of the family, of the siblings anyway. And I am going. My hypothesis is patience has grown with each succeeding person. So I'm the least patient. You're the next. Art's got more patience than you, and Jess has the most patience. Is that you think that's close?
Yeah, and I think that there may be some learned behavior in here, because if every person in front of you in the birth order is impatient, you kind of just have to be patient.
Not only in the birth, yeah. Well, this is all birth order because I am the oldest one.
Right. So
Even though
I
I'm not,
think that there's a natural progression here of, wow, everyone in my family ahead of me is impatient, so I guess I'll just have to be the patient one. So who knows what Jess would be like just on his own without the influences of our family? He might actually be less patient than we realize.
this next one is something that I wish I had learned, and I think I did learn it more in the corporate world than I did as a pastor. I was terrible as a pastor, and that is to be thick-skinned because gosh, how many church members have opinions on how pastors can do things better? Whether it's preaching, whether it's pastoral ministry, whether it's meeting my needs, or whether it's the shape of the facility or the order of worship. I could go on and on and on. There's so many opinions out there that degenerate into criticisms. And I, gosh, it seems in 2020 hindsight that I personally absorbed all of those criticisms. You seem to do a better job of deflecting some of them and knowing when to bring them in and when to just say, I can't do anything about that. I'm just going to move on. You seem to do a lot better than I ever did.
Yeah, I do think I'm more naturally thick-skinned, and I think that if you have a hide, um, which can mean you can be a callous person, so you have to be careful with that. But if you have some thick skin, it does help you in the ministry. And I don't know why. I don't know why, but I just don't care what people think. I just don't. I don't care what you think. It's just that can be very callous. But all right, you can share your opinion with me. That's fine. Okay, I'm gonna hear you out. Okay, you're upset. Great. Okay, you got a point there, and then I just move on. Um, a lot of times, if you're thin-skinned, people will have opinions, and you will take that as criticism, even though it's not. And so I think if
Mm-hmm.
you're naturally thin-skinned, you will just hear people's opinions and think that they're attacking you, even though they're just sharing an opinion. And I think thin-skinned people also have a tougher time discerning how much does this person really care about this? And a thick-skinned person can kind of see through, like, all right, they're just having a bad day. All right, they just had a thing happen to them, or this is just a thing right now and it won't be tomorrow. You just kind of listen and move on. I think thin-skinned people really take things to heart, and they kind of personalize them and they own them, and they think that now I have to do something about this. Whereas a thick-skinned person can just say, okay, they just need to vent for a little bit. Okay, they won't even remember this conversation in the morning, and if they do, they'll come back again. So that's kind of my test: is if you come back 2 or 3 times with something, okay, now you actually mean this. And if not, well, do you even remember that you said this a year ago? No, they don't. They don't remember that you have held on to that for a year, thinking that they think something of you, and they don't even remember saying it. So
That
I
is so
do think
true.
I do think that there is some benefit to being thick-skinned. I will say that the big downside, again, back to this two sides of the same coin thing, is I can come across as not caring, as callous, and there are times where I have been, where my thick-skinned nature has just made me go, well, okay, I really don't care. I've got some other things to do.
Get over it.
Get over it. Get over it. You'll be fine. Let's move on. We can't do anything about it anyway. And those are not the right way. If you're thick skinned, that's not the right way to respond to people. At a bare minimum, you at least need to pretend that you care, even if you don't. I mean, at least try to
Okay.
pretend.
Okay.
But I've actually learned to be more sensitive to people and their concerns, and not just gloss over them, and actually take them to heart a little bit, because a lot of times, in the criticism there is truth, and you need to, if they're saying something, we're like, okay, there's some truth to that, regardless of the motive. I mean, you can run with that, you can do something with it. But I think generally speaking, the more thick-skinned you are, kind of like the more patient you are, I think it's better for you in
I
ministry.
remember I remember clearly my tipping point where I went from very thin skin to modestly thick skin. I was president of a company called Lifeway. It was owned by the denomination. At the time, the denomination had 16 million so-called members. Uh, Even the claim number is much smaller now, but at the time it had 16 million. And I took a phone call from someone who wanted to criticize me. It was one of those rare phone calls that came in, and he blasted all the assistants if they
Via
wouldn't
dedicated
transfer.
line, if I remember.
Yes, yes, it was.
There's a
It
story
was
behind that. Like, there used to be a way to call the president. Just pick up the phone. There was a number.
yes,
That
yes,
doesn't
and
exist anymore.
I don't know. Dial 1-800 Baptist and see who you get.
Don't do that. We don't know where that goes. We don't know where that goes.
Yeah, I have no idea where it goes. So this person called, and he was almost profane. He was saying every word that was borderline profanity, and he did not like something that our company was doing. And he just paused and he said, I own your company. I'm a member of a church, and by default, I own your company. And it was at that moment that I just thought, his name was Jim. It was actually his name. And I said, Jim, you're right. You're one of 16 million owners. So you have 1/16 millionth of opinion. I'm done. Bye. That was a moment where I said, I'll listen to reasonable people, but he was unreasonable. So
Yeah.
that was my point. Let's go to this next one. Determined. Now this is an area where I think I can do so with modesty at the same time. End up saying uh, it's a stronger trait of mine. I am determined. I will move forward with something as long as I possibly can. And determination is really important for pastoral leadership because it's cliche, but it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps backwards. You have to keep moving forward.
Yeah. There's a great book, if I remember right, called Grit.
Angela
Where
Duckworth.
Yeah, Duckworth. She just an incredible book. And so you could almost, instead of determined, you could almost put grit there. And the premise of the book, and I strongly encourage you to get it, is the intersection of passion and perseverance.
Mm.
That's where we find grit, passion, and perseverance. And the whole book's about that. If you lack passion, your perseverance will take you off course because you'll persevere in the wrong things. If you lack perseverance, all that passion is idealism that never does anything. So this idea, you've got to be determined in order to move a church forward, and leading a church is not easy. I'm not going to say it's the hardest job in the world because it's not, but it's definitely harder to lead a church than it is other organizations, generally speaking.
I totally agree. And I've
You've
led a
got to,
lot of organizations.
yeah, it's just kind of, you're just exposed as a pastor in most congregations. I mean, you're seen every week. You have to be accessible. The decisions that you make, you're going to see these people all the time, however it impacts them, good or bad. Um, so you have to have a level of determination. And you know, we have joked about this, Dad, a lot. But you know, the pastorate draws in workaholics and lazy bums. You
Hmm.
know, and there's not a whole lot in between. And so I would just say, for those of you who are overly determined, I would just caution you. You know, you've got to pull back sometimes. And if you do lack the determination, well, you know, your church is not likely to go anywhere, because churches naturally want to settle into, you know, more apathetic patterns. That's just the nature of sin. So I think that, you know, is there an ideal personality trait for a pastor? Is there a best personality for a church? I mean, you need to make sure that your personality matches with the culture. But no, I don't think there's an ideal personality, but I do think that there's some traits that help you a ton. And I think being patient, being thick skinned, being determined is important. And then this last one, I'll just say this: being a learner. You can
Hmm.
learn these things. Anyone can learn the three traits that we just mentioned: patient, thick skinned, determined. If you're my wife loves to tell my children, I love how she says this. Erin's incredible about this. She tells our kids, if you can read it, you can do it. She's just training in them, like, and a lot of times it's when they want to play video games or do something that is of very nominal value other than just entertainment value. And she will say, if you want to do things with your life, you've got to be able to read it. So go read a
Go
book.
Maggie. Go Maggie.
Yeah,
Maggie
now
reads books all the time,
I
waiting
know,
in
and
restaurant lines.
I know, and so Maggie, yeah, she's such a incredible. She's the oldest. She's an incredible girl. We actually have to take the books from her. She's one of those because she will read 1,000 pages to 1,200 pages a week. She'll read 4 and 5 books a week.
Oh, I see her
So
standing up anywhere, just reading. Maggie, there's a wall there. Please be careful.
yeah, yeah. So, but the point that I'm making is you can learn personality traits, and it can become part of who you are. Now, there's some things that are impossible to unwind, of course, but generally speaking, if you want to do better, you can be better. So if you're lacking patience, if you're thin-skinned, if you're not determined, you can be those things. You're not stuck where you are. So um, there you go. Little quick episode there, and want to thank our sponsor, Tyndale. They've got a lot of good books. You should just go to their website and just start perusing. You won't be disappointed. But there's one in particular that we want to share with you, and it's called "The Least of These" by Angie Ward. Great title, and it's all about the pain in this world, the poverty in this world, injustice, brokenness, all the things that we look at as believers and we say, well, this is an insurmountable task. But we are called to bring hope to the vulnerable. And, you know, our faith does not allow us to insulate ourselves with those who are suffering around us. And in the least of these, there are 10 Christian thought leaders that provide a multifaceted look at the church's relationship and responsibility towards those who are vulnerable. This is the third book in the Kingdom Conversations series. Again, The Least of These by Angie Ward is an honest conversation that explores practical ways that we can demonstrate God's love with those who are marginalized, show compassion to them. So you can learn more about the least of these at navpress.org/least of these. So again, navpress.org/least of these. Thank you, those of you who are viewing. I can't see you, but you can see me. We are on YouTube, and we're putting more and more content on YouTube. So go to our channel. It's just Church Answers. Would love for you to subscribe on YouTube. We'll be putting more there, so definitely go subscribe. But also, if you are if you have your podcasting app available, give us a good review. It helps the algorithms. And we like the algorithms here. So thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Rainer on Leadership. There's another one coming next week. We'll see you then.
Hey, folks, this is a PS to our podcast. We got some exciting stuff that we want to offer you absolutely for free. Sam, when you think about predictive factors in a church's growth, if you take out demographics, what are some things that come to mind? Just two. I mean, don't give me a list of 10. Just 2 or 3 things that come to mind on predictive growth of a church.
Well, evangelism and whether the church is doing it or not.
Bingo.
And then I will add, is it an ongoing evangelism emphasis?
Double bingo. Well? And maybe something about leadership and their commitment to that. So all of the above.
Evangelistic churches have evangelistic pastors. Is the staff, is the lead pastor doing the work themselves?
We have a free download for you, and it's actually a sheet that you can self-score. You answer 20 questions, anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And we come back and we predict what your growth rate is going to be for the next year in worship attendance. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a good tool. There's a link to that for the attendance predictor. Look in the show notes. You'll absolutely love it. That's cool. We'll see you soon.